So welcome. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jean. We really appreciate all of you coming here for Sarah. It's a celebration for us. The writing group meets right there. When it's not full of refreshments. We've met there for quite a number of years. Writer Center is like home to us, and obviously when a book comes out in general, it's a big deal. But when it comes out here at the Writer Center, it's especially a big deal. I'm in a role here. I think I may be the token representative of the Goyim here. I remember going through the part of the book that I hadn't read was the glossary at the end, and I was going through and seeing all of the words, and it's like, wow, it's really hard to be a Jew. I mean, it's complicated. but the one that I saw, it's like, oh yeah, schmooze. Okay, I know from schmooze. That's my role tonight. So, but I think one of the things that you see sort of in early writing classes and things is you say, what is the conflict? Because the conflict is what brings out the character. And I think you can see that very much in Sarah's book. She went through an awful lot in a daughter's Kaddish. And in that, I mean, we know her from Writers Group and from looking at all these different pieces, but when you see the whole thing, you start to see very much of her character and of her dad's character. So I wanted to start out maybe asking you about, for a lot of folks who are new to the book, what was the nature of your dad's promise, your promise to your dad, and how did that change?
Well, in traditional Judaism, the mourner's Kaddish is recited by the son. And my father had no sons. So at the time of the death of his father, he asked me to hire a man to recite the Kaddish for him when he died. 23 years later, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I decided there was no way I was going to hire a stranger to speak to God on my father's behalf. My father's father was an Orthodox Jew, and my father had a feminist daughter, so he was sort of stuck in that middle ground, sort of like Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, with the traditional father and the feminist daughter. But I did ask for his blessing. It took him a long time to come to grips with it. But once he did, he said, I don't think you need my blessing, but if you think you do, you have it. I don't know why, as a grown adult, I felt like I needed my father's blessing, but I did. And I don't know if he ever really came to grips with the fact that his daughter was going to be doing this instead of a male. And I never asked him if he really was okay with it, but he did give me his blessing. And I undertook that ritual and bumped up against some gender discrimination in the process.
So for me, one of the things that stuck in my mind in going through the book again was, and that revealed a lot about your dad, was you had a scene at the beach there where you exactly remember what you were wearing and what he was doing. So can you tell us a little bit about that scene, and in particular, how you remember some of the details that that bring out so much in the book?
Well, my father was taking me to the beach before I could walk, and I was in the ocean as a toddler. My father loved the beach and taught me everything about swimming and not being afraid. And there is a scene in the book, for those of you who haven't read it yet, about how my father used to have me climb on his shoulders and then tossed me into the water like as if he were a diving board. And he taught me never to be afraid, that I could always get back up. I wasn't going to drown. He was going to be right there for me. And it's just a memory that lives inside of me. And every time I go to the beach, the memories come flooding back. But how I remember all the details, those of you who know me, I've been journaling since I was a teenager. I journal all the time. And the 4 journals that I filled during the year that I said Kaddish are up there on the mantle. And they inform this memoir. Now, not every single detail do I record in my journals. I didn't record that my father wore beige swim trunks. I just know that because he always wore beige swim trunks with beige moccasins. And he always, when we arrived at the beach, set the business section of the New York Times on the chair, put the little transistor radio on the arm of the chair, so that when the Yankees game started, he would come out of the water and listen to the Yankees game. Those things are just in my memory. They're not recorded in the journals. But the way I felt every day and the experiences I had and the people who supported me, they're there.
Now, what were you wearing, and how do you remember it? You said you had a particular outfit at the beach that you...
Yeah, well, my sisters and I, we just strip off our clothes and just run right in the water. In our bathing suits.
Yes, yes.
But things like the Mary Jane shoes and the little lace anklets, those are things that live in my memory. At the time of the high holidays every year, we got a new dress and new Mary Jane shoes, which we're never allowed to wear any other time. Like, why can't you wear dress-up shoes all the time? No, those are your dress-up shoes. So we had Mary Janes and little white anklet socks to go to the synagogue.
It seems that another big part of your journey in this book was about kind of your encounters with the patriarchy.
Oh, yes.
How did you first bump into that, and how did you deal with it?
The very first time, when Shiva was over, I went with my mother to my parents' synagogue for the morning minyan, wearing my prayer shawl called a talit. And the average age of the men in the room was probably somewhere between 75 and 85. And a man came up to me and said, "You have to take that off." And he was kind of growling. And I thought, okay, now what do I do? I didn't want to do anything to bring dishonor to my father. So I took it off. And that was my first encounter with the patriarchy of Judaism and the first sort of gender bias that I faced. And this was in my father's synagogue. When I traveled for my work, and when I traveled, I was in synagogues in different parts of the country. And in order to recite the mourner's Kaddish, one needs a minyan of 10 people, or a quorum. It comes straight from the Bible, and often there were 9 men and me, and I was not permitted to say the Kaddish because as a female, I wasn't counted as a member of that quorum. So I bumped up against the patriarchy in a number of different ways, in different places.
Have you seen things change as far as the treatment of women since you started this, since this was 11 years ago, yes?
It was, my father died in September 2000, and I recited Kaddish from September 2000 to August of 2001.
But, so have you seen changes in the treatment of women in Orthodox and conservative?
Oh, yes. There are more women rabbis now. Women are being allowed to come to the Torah and read from the Torah. In my synagogue, women read from the Torah. They lead the service. They're full participants. So yeah, there have been a lot of changes. And in my synagogue in particular, we now have new prayer books that have more translations and more transliterations so that people who aren't familiar can follow better. There is a movement toward more equality in the Jewish faith, in the religion.
So, during the course of your year, you had a number of encounters from the book. Which of them stand out for you?
I was in Lansing, Michigan, and always I called ahead before I traveled. I would not accept a contract unless I knew there was a place where I could say Kaddish. And there is a conservative synagogue in Lansing, Michigan that never answered my calls. And there's a small synagogue in Lansing that is a lay-led synagogue, and they didn't have minions. And I left a voicemail message, and a man named Alan Falk called me and said, "I understand you need a minion." I said, "Yes, but I thought you didn't have them." He said, "It is our obligation to organize a minion when someone needs it. And we will put together a minion for you, and I will pick you up at your hotel and take care of it, bring you back to your hotel, pick you up the next day." So I called my client and I said, I have a minion, I can accept the contract. And Alan Falk and Betty Menschik, they opened her home. They had more than the required number of people. She put out a feast bigger than what's in this room for everyone. And I recited Kaddish in her home in the presence of, I don't remember, 12, 14 people. The next morning he picked me up at my hotel, drove me to the synagogue, had a minyan, recited Kaddish, took me back to the hotel where I led my workshop. It was such an outpouring of just heartwarming embrace. That was one of the most significant experiences I had. The other one happened at the University of Delaware when I was teaching. And I don't know how many of you saw Ali Williams. He had to leave. He's the chamber exec here in Bethesda, and there have been a few incidents today, so he had to go back to work. But he organized a minyan for me at the University of Delaware because, unbeknownst to me, none of the synagogues can get a minyan during the summer. Everybody leaves for the summer. So even though before I accepted the contract, I found out there's a Chabad, there's a Hillel, there's a conservative synagogue, they all told me they didn't have enough people because it was the summer. So he put together a minyan in my classroom. It was quite remarkable.
Now, another one that stands out for me as a reader was that your daughter had an accident in the middle of this.
Oh, yes.
How did you manage to continue with, to be able to assemble a minyan then?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to point out Nanette Hoback, who was my supervisor at the courthouse when I got the phone call from the hospital in Barstow, California, that they had cut my daughter out of a car and they were rushing her in for a brain scan to make sure she had no bleeding in her brain. And I just got up from my desk and said, "I'm out of here." Went to Dulles Airport, and 45 minutes later I was in the air. And I was afraid to ask the flight attendants to ask if there were enough people on the plane to form a minyan, because I didn't want to have to deal with the gender issue. So I went to the back of the plane, and then I couldn't remember the Kaddish. I was so upset. I didn't know if my daughter would be alive when I landed. And so I was just like fumbling. So I just opened up my journal and wrote my prayers to God in the journal. When I got to California, someone had contacted the rabbi at the Hillel. Unbeknownst to me then, it was finals week. She put together a minyan for me. Professors came out of their classrooms, and I only know this now because I just spoke to Rabbi Bergson last week. She told me that this one particular professor told his class, "You're on the honor system. I'm going to form a minyan, and I expect all of you to, behave yourselves." And when I met Rabbi Bergson, I thought, well, no problem here. I have a female rabbi. No, there won't be any gender discrimination here. Rabbi Bergson was so kind to me for the days that I was with my daughter through her recovery. And I called her recently and told her she's in the book, and I sent her a copy, and she was just overwhelmed, just absolutely overwhelmed. My daughter also, when she got ready to leave school, she called me and asked me to help her pack. And I went back to California, and she bribed kids in the dorm to come to be in a minyan, and she would serve breakfast. So we served breakfast, and these kids were coming to the minyan, to the room that my daughter had arranged in their pajamas. Free food? We're here. Let's pray and get on with it.
So a lot of folks here are involved in the writing center and the writing process and in book groups. What was your road like?
Oh my God.
First of all, talk to us a little bit about your particular writing process. How do you get from those to this?
Well, I don't know how many of you read May Sarton, but she's written a number of books from her journals. And I've always admired her, and I thought I would publish my journal entries as diaries. Well, I was advised early on that nobody would read it and nobody would buy it and nobody would want to read diary entries, that I should write it as a story. So the first thing I had to do was just give up that idea and start all over again. There are a number of people here in my writing group, and many of you, including Dave, Jean, have read chapters over and over ad nauseum. Andy as well. It's been a long process for me. It's taken me 20 years to get from there to here. I had an agent for 2 years. She couldn't sell the book, and so I went out and found a publisher on my own. And I have a wonderful, wonderful publisher, Wonderwell. They've been amazing. The editorial process was wonderful. The cover, picking the cover, writing the back flap and the front flap, and helping me learn how to market a book. My professional career, and you know that I've been a presenter for years, 35 years. I was a consultant and a presenter, and I had no problem marketing myself as an entrepreneur because I provided a service that people needed. But I'm finding that promoting a book is a very different skill set, and it's a new full-time job. So getting from there to here has been a journey, and a number of you in this room have been with me for that journey. So thank you.
Yeah, I know. As I said, we've a lot of this work starts here at the Writers Center. I think all of us in our particular writers group right now started in classes and workshops that were given here, and then we sort of gradually evolved into a group of writers, and it's something that we've carried on for quite a number of years now.
Do you remember how many, Andy?
Over 2 years.
Over 10. We'll stop there. Over 10.
But yes, very much in that way. The actual writing process, how do you, I mean, you have chapters that are stories. How do you form those from the diary entries?
How do I form the stories from the diary entries? The diary entries give me the facts. They remind me how I was feeling at any particular moment. They give me like the names of the synagogues and the names of people like Alan Falk and Allie Williams, and so they help me provide the facts and the feelings and the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, like in my writing process, I ride my bike a lot and I have blogs at the end of the day, and it's really important for me when I'm writing to be able to put myself back where I was.
Yeah.
And then writing happens.
You know, when you journal, we live our lives day to day. And when we journal, we capture those days. When we go back to the journals, it gives us a chance to live the life again. So we're living it in real time, but then we have a chance to live it again. We live forward, but the journal helps us almost live backwards. And journaling, for any of you who don't do it, I can't advocate it strongly enough. It's therapeutic. It's the cheapest therapy that there is. My respect to therapists in the room. I know there are a number of you here, but all you need is a $1 book from a composition book that you can get at Staples, and it helps you to remember how you were living your life while you were living it.
So I was wondering if there were folks who might have questions for Sarah in the book. Yes.
Okay. My question is in two-part. One is, did the father know that they were planning to say Kaddish for him?
Yes, I told him I wanted to say Kaddish for him. I told him that I believed that God would respect my voice more than the voice of a stranger. And he finally gave me his blessing.
Okay, that is going to be the second part of my question. How did he gave you his blessing? What do you think drove him to give you his blessing?
Can I just repeat it? The question is what drove him to give you his blessing?
I would like to think it's because I was very persuasive. And I begged. And I don't know how many of you in the room are fathers of daughters, but I imagine that it's pretty hard for the father of a daughter to turn down a daughter who's begging you for something.
Yes.
Carol, oh. Go ahead.
You mentioned sibling sisters.
I have two younger sisters.
How did they react to this whole process? Were they supportive, or did they find objection to it?
My sister Lois has been one of the best advocates I have had over these 20 years. She's read numerous drafts. My sister Jane, not so much. And I can't speak for her. But my sister Lois has been behind me 110% in this. Carolyn?
So I've known Sarah before, during, and after the book, and I always think of you as the consummate professional. But I'm learning something new in this discussion. In the book, I got that there was, you had to dance this line between your father, your mother, your own children, strangers, in being able to fulfill this. But I'm hearing for the first time, for your workplace, you were getting, you're in demand. People want to hire you, but they're hearing, oh, I need to check if I have a minion. Can you just say, as the professional, what was it like to tell your potential clients and employers, I'll get back to you because I've got to say these prayers for my father? It was a risk. It had to have been a risk.
The question is, what was it like to tell my clients that I couldn't work for them because I had, until I could be assured I had a minion? One of my clients is in the back of the room. And I found a synagogue near her workplace, and I asked her if we could start the workshops a little later than typical so that I could pray first and then start to work. And she was extremely accommodating. Thank you, Louise. The woman in Lansing, Michigan was stunned when I called her back and I told her that these people from Kehillat Israel were going to put a minyan together for me. She said, I never heard of such a thing. It's amazing to me. And she didn't know much about Jewish mourning rituals, and she learned about them from that experience. She was kind of blown away by it all. But clients, I think they pretty much know when they ask you, can you do a job for me? When you say, I'll have to get back to you, they say, okay, get back to me when you can. Louise.
You had mentioned that along this journey, you've seen changes that, with some breaking down of some of that gender bias. I wondered if you are aware of other women, or has there been any kind of reprieve on other women wanting to kind of follow in your footsteps in Kaddish?
Am I aware of other women who want to follow in my footsteps, and are they able to do so?
Yes.
I have a colleague, an Orthodox rabbi, who has told me that the Orthodox denomination is opening up more to women. Now, I don't know to what extent that is because I don't observe in an Orthodox synagogue, but I can speak to my synagogue, Congregation Bethel, and women have full rights, all the same roles and responsibilities as men. They come and they read from the Torah, and some of them read more beautifully. And they have all the same. One of the things that I noticed on the last day that I recited Kaddish, the last day of my Avalut, I decided to lead the service. And for me, it was a huge challenge. And the two people who were, give me a minute. The two men who were at my side the whole time I was saying Kaddish are in this room, Rick and Jonathan. And they knew how hard it was for me to get up there and lead the service because my Hebrew was very, very rudimentary. And several women came up to me after that and said that I paved the way for them to feel that they could do the same thing. I was the second woman in my synagogue to start wearing a tallis in the 1990s. And now, I would say 95%, would you say, women are wearing tallis? It's the prayer shawl that we wear. So I think that, yes, I did pave a way. Andy.
I'm from Sarah's writing group, and when I first met her, it was before the writing group. We met in a series of memoir classes. and Sarah would produce chapters of her book, and each workshop leader had a different idea of where Sarah should go with this, what her writing should look like, and it sort of seemed that you were being, you would change something and then undo it, and in each workshop, and then we formed the writers group, and
Can everyone hear her? Can you stand?
then we formed the writers group, and we gave Sarah a lot of feedback, maybe sometimes more than you wanted. But at a certain point, I saw you change and start to just trust in your own voice and your own direction. And you would say, you know, gee, this is good feedback, I'll take it, but you know what? I'm going to keep doing it this way. And you even, I don't know whether it was somebody, an agent or somebody, who was trying towards the end to take you in a really different direction. Yeah. And you said, you know, I can't do it. I want to stay true to my own story. So I want to hear a little bit more about the process of how you came to trust your voice and your story in the face of all this, it's certainly well-meaning feedback, but
Well,
sometimes contradictory.
Yeah. It took me a long time to find my voice. It's taken me a lifetime, actually, to find my voice. I don't know if there was a specific day or a specific person that triggered that, but I remember taking a private class with Dave, whose book cover crush is there, and he was the first one who said to me, "This is a feminist story." I was like, "Oh, yeah, it is." I can't say if there was a specific moment or a specific critique that I got, but along with the writing process, finding my own voice about everything in my life has been a life's journey. And I'm just now at that place in my life where I can say what my truth is and stand behind it. There was a hand back there. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
I'm curious about one aspect. So obviously, family means a lot to you. If you were going to take on this responsibility for your father, you mentioned a little bit of tension with maybe one of your sisters. I don't know the family. I've not read the book. Can you comment on how you wrote about any negative relationship, any tension within the family in a memoir? Did you go a little easier on those things in order not to hurt people's feelings? Did you put it right out there? I think this is probably an issue that other people who write about their own lives, their own families deal with, and I'm curious how you did.
Yeah, many of the people who are writing memoir in classes that I've taken have spoken to, what do I say about my family when they're still alive? The question is, how did I decide how to write about my family members? I have children. My two sisters have children. We have grandchildren. I tried to be kind, yet truthful. I tried not to smear anyone. I did tell the truth about my mother. Many of you have known me a long time, and this may be the first time you ever knew that information about my mother. But in response to Andy's question, this was one of the ways I found my voice. I was encouraged by my editor to tell that truth. I tried to be respectful. I tried to tell the truth in a way that conveyed that truth without ripping someone apart. And it's a fine line. And I know that if you're familiar with The Glass Castle, Jeanette Walls starts her book seeing her mother eating out of a dumpster. I decided not to start my book that way, but I was conscious of making sure I told enough of the truth. Rashid. I just met Rashid at the balloon festival when he allowed me to jump the line so that my grandson could get up in a hot air balloon instead of waiting. He is my hero.
Well, my question was for your art. I was just wondering, because for me, I'm kind of new to it. I mean, I do poetry, some of it, but I was curious as to like when you are writing your books, you have a couple books. Is it more authentic when you do it in a poetry form, or you just write it like straightforward? Like, how do you like?
Oh my gosh, I have the greatest respect for poets. They can say it in so few words. And those of you who've known me a long time know I can fill a 20-word message with 100 words. Brevity is not my forte. I can't imagine myself writing poetry. I have the utmost respect. I like to read it, but I wouldn't know how to get my message. And a haiku, I took a haiku class one time and thought, oh my gosh, how do they do that? I write prose. And the one thing about journaling, I just write. I don't edit it. I don't stop. I don't check my spelling, my grammar, my punctuation. I just get it out on the page. And so I'm used to long flowing prose. And thank God for my editor because she helped me to be more concise in certain places. But if you're writing poetry, I have the utmost admiration for you. Keep it up and keep writing. Naomi.
I'm curious, you said about your daughter, you have other children. Did they know you were writing this book about their grandfather? And how do they feel about it? And did you let them read any chapters along the way?
I have a daughter and a son. They know about the book. Neither one of them had interest in reading it along the way. My son is not a reader. So for him to pick up any book, other than if it's teaching you soccer moves, he's a soccer coach, so he would read a book about, how to play, how to figure out the plays. But I don't know if either of my children, I don't know if my daughter will read it.
Do you encourage them, or you just let it be?
I let it be. The question is, do I encourage them to read it? They're adults. They'll make their own decision. Go ahead.
So, congrats.
Thank you.
This is obviously a dream, I think, for many of us who haven't gotten here. Persistence. We've heard about persistence, perseverance. You mentioned that you worked with an agent for 2 years. And then you went on your own, and you found this publisher.
Yes.
What did you do that your agents did not, that your agent or agents did not?
I don't know what my agent was doing. She was sending me regular reports of who she had approached. I don't know why she couldn't sell it. One of the publishers of Jewish literature is Fig Tree Publishing, and they did not take the book. But once Wonderwell took the book, someone at Wonderwell knows Fred Price, who is the publisher at Fig Tree, and he was so excited about the book. And he even wrote a big thing about it in the Fig Tree newsletter, promoting it. And I thought, well, darn, why didn't you take it when the agent presented it to you? Of course, it is a better book now because it's been professionally edited. But I narrowed it down to 2 different publishers. I had interviewed about 4, narrowed it down to 2. And the reason I selected Wonderwell was, first of all, I loved Maggie Langrick, who is the owner of Wonderwell. She said, I love the story, but I think we can make your book even better. The other publisher was going to get it out sooner, and I decided I want this book to be the best book it can be. So instead of having a launch in the spring of 2022, I'm having a launch in the fall of 2022 with a better book. Chris.
So I was cheating, looking up the Minyan and Kaddish while you were talking, because I hadn't read the book yet. So, two questions. One is, Kaddish is 11 months in one day.
I'm sorry?
11 months in one day.
Yes.
So, does that mean that you say the Kaddish once in a month for 11 months and then once after
No.
the interment? Or how often do you actually say the Kaddish?
You say the Kaddish every morning and every evening for 11 months. And the reason we do 11 months is that God's judgment stage is 12 months. But the people who need 12 months of in God's judgment stage are the mean and wicked people. So in order to convince God that our loved one isn't among the mean and wicked, they don't need as much Kaddish.
Right.
So we stop at 11 months.
So you have to do this before breakfast and before dinner every day?
Morning services in my synagogue are at 7:30.
Okay.
Evening minyan is at 8 p.m.
And then the minions, you have to have a minion every time for every day.
Yep.
Which is a
And
significant accomplishment.
it, yes.
The other thing I saw, which was obviously the orthodoxy, is that men and women in Hebrew faith were expected to go to services, except in the case of Kaddish, they said because the women would not be praying before breakfast and before dinner because they were expected to be home taking
Right.
care of the family. But clearly that's like 2,000 years ago, and you would think that there might have been some change in the orthodoxy, but apparently
Yeah.
it was not.
Well, that was one of my arguments to my father.
Yeah.
Women were exempted from saying Kaddish. That did not mean they were excluded. Exempted does not mean excluded. And I told my father that, yes, I have a house. Yes, I have children. Yes, I'm working 2 jobs, but I can still do this. And being exempted doesn't mean I'm excluded, and I have choice. And I can manage it, and I did. Now, I want to thank all of you for being here. I have people who have been my clients for decades and decades. Jonathan and Rick, I want to thank you for being here. You sat next to me for those 11 months after the deaths of your parents. When you read about Jonathan and Rick, they're here. I want to thank all of you for being here. And please help yourselves. I'll be here. My friend Deborah is selling books if you want to buy them, and I'll be sitting in the back signing books if any of you want my signature in your book. But please, we're here for another good long while. Please help yourselves, and I'll be here. And thank you so much for your support. This is a dream come true. And I couldn't have done it without all of the support of all of you in this room. So, thank you. And a shout out to Dave for this beautiful interview.